Can you tell me about the history of Muslims and the Vikings and the first contact that Muslims had with the Vikings?
Oh wow, subhanAllah, what a great thing. As we know, Scandinavia, during the same time that Al-Andalus was ruled by the Muslims in the Iberian Peninsula, so between the 8th and the 11th centuries, during this period of times, the Vikings were ruling in Scandinavia. Okay, so in Sweden, in Norway, in Denmark, and these Vikings had contact through trade. So we always think, when we think of the Vikings, we always think of some kind of people, savages with helmets and horns on their helmets, all this stuff. This is not true. This is not true. They were also tradespeople amongst them. There were intellectuals amongst them. There were people who were traveling. So Vikings had the chance and the opportunity to come in contact with Muslims in Al-Andalus as well as in the Muslim world. And they traded with them. And many of them accepted the faith through contact, through good contact with the Muslims. It even there is even a story about a diplomat coming from Baghdad, going to Sweden, staying there for a year, okay, and leaving us a book behind which is called Ar-Risala, okay, and there where he describes that he came across Muslim villages in the Viking lands in Sweden. And that was before actually he arrived there. So somehow these people came in contact with the Muslims, and this could have just happened through trade. They have also discovered coins, Arabic coins, up in Sweden, for example. So there was trade 100%, and there was such a good relationship that there were even Vikings who decided to stay in Muslim lands. So it's yeah, and we still don't know that. By the way, this is something. I mean, what I'm telling you now is something that developed in the last 10 to 15 years. This is very new development. Okay, we have Swedish and Norwegian and Danish historians who rely entirely on Muslim historians, and they say they're just the only trustworthy ones because the Christian or Europeans actually were very biased against the Vikings, and they would just trust Muslim historians. And this is something that developed in the last 10 to 15 years, and we need still a lot that has to be done still.
I heard once that one of the Sahaba went to the Vikings and documented it there and came back as early as the Sahaba's time period.
It was not a Sahab. It was there were several diplomats, because the idea of embassies, by the way, came from the Muslims from Baghdad under the Abbasid rule. It was the Abbasids which was the 8th, ninth, and 10th centuries. So not necessarily a Sahaba. The Sahabi went, for example, to China. These were Sahabi who went to China. Sahabi went to India. Sahabi went to Asia. Yes, but not necessarily. It's not known, at least it's not in my knowledge, that any Sahaba has ever been to Scandinavia. That's none
Uh,
of my knowledge. But I know that many of them went to Asia, and that's also a development of Islam in Asia, especially in China, India, Central Asia, in these places, yes. But not necessarily in Scandinavia.
I heard, well, whoever it was, that they were very thrown off about how they burned their dead and put them in the lake afterwards, the Vikings.
These were diplomats, yes. And this is written in the Risala. In the Risala that I just mentioned is indeed written
Can you
how
tell us
they.
a story from there, if not that one?
Yeah. One of the stories is that how appalled the Muslims were when they saw how the Vikings would bathe in the same water within the family, like starting with the oldest one up to the baby. And this meant that about 20 to 30 people would bathe in the same water.
Ooh.
Uh, and that was appalling. You have to imagine that you have the grandfather going in, who has the biggest right, the most of the rights, because it was obviously the oldest one, going to the father, going to, and then the women, by the way, after that the women, and then just the children until the baby. So yes, it was not very hygienic. Also the thing of they would eat with their hands without washing. Okay, they would not wash their hands before, they would not wash their hands after. Okay, they would have sexual intercourse and they would not wash or take showers. So this is something that has been given through the Risala. Okay, and we know these things because of that time, and that's why I say that there are Scandinavian historians who actually trust Muslim historians more than they would trust Christian ones.
Mm. And how did they bury their dead? Do you remember that in the book?
Well, they do put them on fire basically. So they put them on a boat, okay, because that was obviously it was a seafarers nation. So they would put a dead person on the boat, put them and put the boat into the sea, and then put it on fire. So that was one of the major ways of burying or having a Viking burial, which is described in the Risale. Yeah.
And their woman would scream, something like that. Something about the woman.
Yeah, well, yes, yes. It would happen. By the way, they have also these, like the Arabs later also, which is forbidden in Islam, to have these people who start crying, having the women who not only mourn but cry and scream out loud and play a lot of theater. By the way, because some of them were actually actresses doing that, and this happened
Wow.
also during Arab time, and this is forbidden in Islam. That was forbidden for us to do. Okay, so
Anything else
yes.
interesting from the Risala on Vikings history?
SubhanAllah, so many things actually. I don't know where to start or where to end. But if you consider the relationships that they had also, that the Vikings actually couldn't read or write, they didn't have an alphabet. Okay? They had a runic alphabet, which was the alphabet used only for gravestones. So just to describe who lies here, okay, just to put the name of the person there, that's the only way they would write something. But actually, they couldn't read and write. They would not write literature. That's why we don't have anything from the Vikings directly. The Vikings did not leave anything behind. Nothing written, no written literature. The only written literature we have, which is true literature from that time, is to the Muslims who went to visit, who did trade and were diplomats in Viking lands. So yes.
Um, I'll, you can keep on going with stories if you have more.
Let me just think. The Vikings specifically now. Uh, Also, people who fall in love, let's say. I mean, you have a lot of these love stories. Like in Al-Andalus, you would have a lot of these love stories. The problem is, many Vikings were not even Christians that time. I think we lost the period of time to there, I would say, why didn't we do more about bringing through the message? I wouldn't say to convert these people, but to bring through the message of Islam, because the Vikings, the time that they were dealing with the Muslims, many of them were not Christians. Most of them were not Christians. So had we, I don't want to use that, I don't know if had we pushed Islam through, I don't know if it's a good word now, but had we given them the message, I believe that we would have had Scandinavians nowadays we would have had Scandinavians being Muslim in majority maybe rather than minority. So I believe that that would have been the case because it was not difficult and people accepted the faith more easily than accepting Christianity, for example. But this changed when they became Christians, of course.